Hello, good afternoon, good evening. It's 6:07, and we're starting. Today is February 22nd, and we're starting the accounts meeting tonight. And we have a new member, and we'll have the clerk just explain all the fun stuff that we do here today in accounts.
Very simple. The packets that you got, I'm sure you're familiar with, is the accounts payable warrants. These are the bills that we pay for the city and school. And the accounts committee goes over the warrants and looks at the different payments that we make. If you have any questions on any of the payments, you want further explanation, then I can either sometimes remember and give it to you tonight, or I write it down. And that was the other piece of paper you got in your package, was some of the questions that came up at the last meeting, and I was just giving them some clarification on them.
All right, makes sense.
So the first one, there was a fee for a Zoom payment was made to Zoom, and it was the yearly fee for the school membership. The second one was Delage Land and Services, and it was 9 lease agreements for copiers over at the schools, different schools. The third item, excuse me, the Education Alliance, James Samuels, is a feasibility study for establishing early college programs. There's quite a bit under his contract for research, support, enrollment, career pathways, facility development, higher education institutes, connections, and negotiating. And the last one was the Chapin Sheds, and that was a purchase by this library on the east side. I believe it was the East Side Library purchased a shed. And that was it. Councilor Mendez, it was also from, I think it was the December or November meeting, you were asking about, and I'm not sure if I got it right. I emailed over to Captain Williamson and on the shot spotter system, and I sent did I send the email to you in the packet?
I don't think so.
From Captain Williamson?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can make copies for you guys afterwards. He just explained the shot spotter record system when we received it, how many miles it goes, and what it does and what the fees are. So I can make photocopies for you guys. I'm sorry about that. And then the other one I left on the table when we came in is our department code numbers. So when you're looking at the warrants, our PO numbers on the city side always have the department number in them. So if you look at page 1, the very first payment that we made, 24-Hour Power Incorporated, and if you go over the PO number column, everybody's with me. It's on, I'm sorry, P22074, warrant number.
I'm sorry.
In the top left-hand corner, it tells you the warrant number.
Oh, okay, I see it. Okay.
So if you look at the PO number, the first 3 digits, 210, is police. So if you look at your sheet that I gave you, and you go down to 0210, I don't know, it looks like it's in new alphabetical order. Police is 0210, that's their department number. So you know that's a PO number from the police department. And that's all I have. Anybody has any questions on the warrants?
The question that I have is the year-to-date. Is that fiscal year or calendar year? Only
It's fiscal year.
because it was confusing, because a lot of the year-to-date invoiced was 0, and then it was paid a lot more. It was several of them, so
Right.
that's why I thought it was
No,
calendar
because
year.
our budgets are on fiscal year, so it goes by the budget. So it should be fiscal year. year-to-date total paid.
But does it make sense that a lot of them would just had 0 year-to-date invoiced and then it was paid?
I don't know,
Even on this page, the year-to-date
yeah,
invoice.
that column doesn't
so
seem to get filled in, but if you look at the year-to-date paid, that is,
The amount is very high, so it tells you it's for the fiscal year.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just when they printed that it just didn't put the correct year-to-date.
I'll double check it and see
Invoiced.
why that doesn't get filled in, and if there's a way that they're munis reports, so it's not like we can plug, when we process the payments, they plug in the information into the different columns, but I can look into that. I don't know how much it would help as long as we know what's being paid. And the year-to-date total is for procurement. And then it's for the 1099s if we send them out, that's the totals that will go out.
Okay. Counselor Fowler had questions, so.
Yes.
I did, and actually, before I get into the specifics, I think this is my 3rd time that I've had an opportunity to serve on accounts. I happen to think it's one of the most important committees that we have, but I also think the auditor's office is one of the most important offices we have in the city. And I say that because if the city budget is about $500 million, if you add in all of the grants that are received on the school side, on the police side, environmental grants that may come into DPW, I think a conservative estimate, and I'll let the auditor correct me if I'm wrong, I would say we probably process 700 billion. I'm sorry, 700.
I was gonna say, not billion.
Yeah, not billion, thank the Lord. $700 million in money that comes into the city and has to be properly accounted for. Recently, she lost 2 key people from her office. They've gone on to better paying jobs, and I do not fault anyone for that. So the first thing I'd like to say is that I think the auditor deserves an opportunity to talk with the mayor and make sure that she gets top-notch replacements, but I also hope that in the FY23 budget, there'll be perhaps, if not a reorganization, a reflection on all of the work that her office has to do. And do we have the key people there to do it? Do we have the key positions there to do it? And I don't know that because I'm not there every day, and she's the expert. But I do think as counselors, we should support her if additional staff are needed, if key positions are missing, because and I had this conversation with her today, I'm concerned that we're processing accounts payable, but I'm not sure how much auditing we're doing. Now, we sit here, and I want anyone to correct me if I'm wrong, I think we sit here so that we give credibility to the accounts payable process, that we're here to say everything is proper. And yet, I'm going to point out some issues in a couple of minutes where I think there's information missing that makes it hard for us to reach that conclusion. Under our ordinances, the city auditor is supposed to carefully examine all accounts and claims which have been approved, and if they are just legally contracted and duly authorized, he or she shall audit and present the same properly filed and labeled with a complete list thereof to the Standing Committee on Accounts. So we get these warrants, and I brought some copies of this. We can hand it out. These are just some of the issues which, and I know you folks received it by email, but just take one and, oh, hell, I'm sorry, let me give one to D'Agostino. I got missing papers for them. So let's when you get this, let's go to warrant number P22074. And this is, again, we're all subjective here. Councilor Rodriguez may notice something that I don't, or he may think nothing of it, but P22074, and I don't have the pages written down in here, my apologies, but it's alphabetical.
Yes, it is.
Amazon.
Yeah.
And I went through this the last time I was on accounts. Through January, we have spent $528,792 with Amazon. And that's for a whole sundry list of different items. So within that subset of Amazon, some may be textbooks, some may be building supplies, some might be equipment, some might be machinery. And I guess my question is, folks, if that's true, shouldn't we be examining what is the commodity or the service that we're buying? And if it is significant in the amount of money, go out to bid rather than just sit back on a computer and order from Amazon. Because if it's $528,000 now, after 6 months, it's reasonable to assume it's going to be over $1 million by June 30th. And so I guess my first question, and if the auditor doesn't have the answer, I understand, because I think most of this is the school side. Does anyone take a look at what's being purchased at Amazon to find out if it can be bundled, and then we could go out and go through the procurement process and issue a bid? Surely there must be a textbook provider here in Massachusetts that might be able to provide textbooks if in fact we're buying them from Amazon in bulk, and if we go out to bid, we might be able to save some money.
The school department has, in their administrative office, they have somebody that's supposed to be their procurement officer that looks at the different purchases. On our side, we have Mike, and he does look at different vendors at different times to make sure that they're not going over the 10,000 or 25,000, and notifies them and stops the payment, the PO from being processed. Not sure how they handle everything on the school side, but in our office, no matter if it's a school PO or a city PO, we audit every single invoice that comes through our office. Nothing is bypassed. So we look at everything for the proper purchase, not for where the line item that it's coming out of, unless it's a non-expense line, because you can only use expense lines. So when I audit the warrants, once they're processed, I look at every single GL account number to make sure it's an expense line. If it's not an expense line, then I look to see why, and usually it's a refund. They're under object code, it starts with a 4. Sometimes it's tailings. If somebody had lost their check, they come in and they get it replaced, it goes through tailings. So there's different ones, and then I make sure that there's no payroll line items on a warrant, because that only goes through payroll. And then we make the necessary corrections. So over at the school department, there should be someone looking at all these expenses.
So they would group by either a commodity code or some other identifier that would say, okay, in this fiscal year, we've exceeded $10,000 for a particular item. Let's say tools. Let's say the maintenance department over in the school department needs to order, a great number of tools for their maintenance craftspeople. I just don't know if we're just sitting back at a computer using Amazon, is anyone taking the time to do that? And maybe we can find out from the school department what level of detail do they get into? Because the last time I was on accounts, I was told that people just sit in the schools, and if they need something, they'll go on the internet, they'll go to Amazon, they'll find out how they can order it, and it'll be delivered to that particular school or that particular location. And every once in a while, buying something from Amazon, I can understand that, especially instructional supplies. But if we're up to $528,000, almost $529,000 in 6 months, that's not an insignificant figure. And it just seems to me that if we're spending that kind of money at Amazon, we ought to know what qualifiers we're putting on those purchases. And I don't know how the rest of you feel about that, but by the way, Amazon starts on page 2, I think, and goes on to page 3 on P22074. Now let me go on to Comcast Northeast Regional, and that is on page. And again, I don't expect answers tonight because there is no way that the auditor would know all of these different issues. That's on page 11 of P22074. Comcast Northeast Regional Facilities, Building and Grounds Repair and Maintenance, I guess, $284.49. Department equipment and rental, communication services. It isn't the amount, it's why are we paying Comcast anything?
Some departments do have Comcast
You mean cable TV?
cable TV.
Okay, so this would be for
This is.
cable TV like at home, or?
Right, correct.
Okay, but why would we have buildings and grounds repairs?
That must be where they're paying it out of. I don't know about building, because I didn't think they had cable, but they could have it in the commissioner's office. But I know the police department has it.
Yeah.
And the fire department,
Okay,
which is the other departments on here. And it looks like park.
all right,
It
let's,
could be,
okay, let's go on to Thomas Kerwin.
would you like me to ask?
Yeah, just, if that's for cable TV, I understand. I just don't understand why we would be repairing buildings and grounds for Comcast. What building would they own?
I didn't think they had cable upstairs, so, but I will double check on that.
All right. All right, Thomas Kerwin, I believe, is on page, it's on page 24. So, and again, colleagues, this is what worries me or bothers me. We're asked to read this. To make sense of this with so little information is, I think, virtually impossible. So we've paid Thomas Kerwin, whoever he is, $87,600 to date to be a project manager. Project manager of what?
So and on the warrant, for some reason, it does not do the 2 lines of what we send the check out for. So he's actually, Thomas Kerwin, and his company name is PCA 360 LLC. And he is the project manager for the Huntington Roof project over at the school department.
Well, and this is, and Councilor Rodriguez, I don't know if you've been on accounts before, but this is the other conversation I had with the auditor today. Apparently, the Muni system, which we use, limits the amount of information that you can put on a particular line to identify a particular expenditure. And it just strikes me as being worthless to us to go through these in detail. And just imagine if all 5 of us had to call the auditor and say, well, why is Thomas Kerwin getting $87,600? Is it pursuant to a contract? What is he doing? There should be a level of detail on here where at least elected officials know what's going on. I mean, if I handed this to a resident, they would have absolutely no idea what was going on. And I don't have that much idea of what's going on. And we're all pretty experienced in government. So I thank you for the clarification.
Can I just ask a quick question through you?
Sure.
Through the chair? So in the general ledger, who inputs that description? Is it you or is it the person who's submitting the request?
No, our office, the auditing office sets up.
So it's whatever they send you, basically, that's what you just put in?
Well, like I was explaining to Councilor Farwell today is we set up, I don't want to use the word basic because it's not really basic, but lack of a better word at the moment, we set up certain descriptions for object codes that we use over and over again. If we put a lot of detail in there, that we would have so many of accounts that it would be very hard to pick out. If somebody had to go in and find a code to set up in the system or find a code that would fit what they were paying, they would have to go through thousands and thousands of codes if we had that much detail. And on top of it, it could create multiple if we used, say, a word or a name before project manager, then we would have to know exactly what we were looking for when we were looking up codes. So we kind of use more of a code that everybody could pick, like supplies or office supplies or project manager, telephone, and then the org code, it describes what department it's coming from and if it's a goods or a service that it's coming out of. So we use more of a description there.
Yeah, because I mean, I like to basically support what Council Farwell is saying, because when this stuff goes through this committee, it's almost like a check mark that we reviewed it and agreed with it and signed off on it, basically. That's what it's saying to the public. Because that's what the function of this committee is to basically say, we got all of this, we checked it off. I mean, whether you just browse through it or whatever the deal is, but I basically, when I get these, I look at the larger amounts. I don't know if you do the same thing. There's something that kind of sticks out. So perhaps what you might want to do, and this is just an advice, is when you see something for $87,000 project manager, is maybe add something next to it.
They're
In
already
addition to-
preset,
Oh,
so
they're
you
preset.
can't go in. That's kind of what I was getting at. We kind of we set up all these codes in advance. And then whenever we have a project and we need a project manager, or we need acquisition, or,
There's not another column, for instance, of additional information or anything like that on Munis?
no, not in this area, no.
Yeah, because that would help. If there was some sort of an addendum that existed next to the project manager, just to make it a little easier for us lay people to understand that, you know, he was paid $87,000, but because he's been working on such and such and such project. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the fact that we're paying a project manager money to oversee a project. But when you just see it like that, and there's a couple other ones down here that, you know, the numbers are just, you know, staggering in a sense where, you know, the Amazon one is a pretty good one because, I mean, we're spending all that money on Amazon when we have, you know, WB Mason right here in the community that could be doing some of those other things for us locally. You know, and sometimes we have this tendency of saying, well, their prices are cheaper. Well, the reason why their prices are cheaper is because they're getting more business. So if we gave a mom and pop an opportunity from a city standpoint, perhaps their prices too could be a little less, you know? So if there was a way just to add, you know, some sort of a column or something that could help the process a little bit for us would be probably worthwhile.
Yeah, I would have to go through IT and see if there's a way. As far as I know, there's no other account description available. We're also upgrading, so maybe Munis with the upgrade has a little bit better reporting.
Yeah, well, you know what?
We can look
I know
into
there's this love affair with Munis, you know? Other communities aren't using Munis.
I know.
And if it's not doing the job for us, you know, it's time to maybe I mean, Munis has been around since you were downstairs, you know, since the early 90s or whatever. So, you know,
99.
things kind of move on. And if it's not working for us in today's America, in the sense, there are other programs out there that makes it a lot easier that perhaps we should look into and say, you know, it's time to move on into something else that's more doable in the sense. Because you know, and I agree with you. If you hand this to the common citizen here in the city and say, here you go, review this, they would have a heart attack, you know, looking at some of these things. So I think it's time for us. I know it's not everybody, because when I was downstairs, I didn't have a love affair with this stuff because I didn't quite understand exactly what these things were, you know, and you want to make it as simple as possible to know that X dollars came in and where Y went, and now we got Z left. You know, it's that simple, you know. So if it's not working for us, it's time for us to kind of look at the possibility of going with another system, you know, that might be more reasonable, more user-friendly and all that other stuff to make your jobs a little easier as well. You know, so you don't have to sit here and be grilled with things that you got to go back and forth with us, you know. Try to make it a lot easier so that it's self-explanatory. You go, oh, I understand what that was. Oh, I understand what this was. You know, if it's not working, I think it's time to kick it to the curb and move on, you know. Okay, thank you.
Just, and through the chair to you, Counselor, we've crossed the $500 million mark. I mean, I just think that means that we should take a look at what have we done the last 30 years? Is it still applicable? Can it be modified to do what we want it to do? And if it can't, then I think we need to move to the next level to make it easier for the auditor and easier for all of us to understand where the money is going. I will say in the interim, though, that I think the auditor deserves to have a couple of people on staff to be able to look and input the information and max out whatever capabilities the current system has, because it's not going to change overnight.
Well, I actually had that as a question after you were done in terms of the staff in the office. No, go ahead.
All right, let me go on. All right, so on page, again, this is P22074, page 24, KJS LLC.
Yeah, that's another one that's.
$441,559.95 paid year to date. That's for 6 months. So it's reasonable to assume we may pay them double that by the end of the fiscal year. And all I have for a level of detail is other contract services. Now, yes, the auditor is quite right. I can look at the code and find out what department that is. But other contract services for almost $500,000, again, that, and I don't expect an answer tonight, but councilors, that just doesn't cut it for me.
That's the water main replacement
Okay.
contract.
All right, well, that is very helpful to know that. Now, the next one, again, this is P22074, but this also carries over to the next one. You will see other one-time vendors. Let me go to that page where it begins. I think it begins on page 34. So one-time vendor, and you'll see all these different amounts. I did call the auditor, and she was kind enough to explain that these are all individuals that are getting some type of a rebate, refund. They overpaid. In one case, however, someone got $2,136.83 back for real estate taxes. Another one got $2,538. Another individual got $24,831.50 back for real estate abatements. I am not suggesting in any way that this is the case, but without a name, how do I know if there's favoritism? How do I know who's getting what rebates and why? And if I'm going to read all of this information, and this is, as you can tell, it's pretty extensive, it just seems to me somewhere a name or an address should be there. What address received a $24,831 abatement on real estate taxes? I know it wasn't 94 Braymore Road.
It wasn't mine.
And I'm not trying to be funny, but Anne Marie did explain that if we were to give each one of these individuals a vendor code, we would eventually run out of vendor codes for all of those vendors who supply goods and services to the city on a regular basis. But that goes back to the question that Councilor Rodriguez raised. Is the system what we want it to be now?
So this all comes out of the Treasurer Collector's Office.
Yeah.
They, this is for mostly real estate and tax title. So they run a report to see who's overpaid. They run a batch. We receive the batch work with all the names on it and who's getting a refund. But when we process it through the system, like Councilor Farwell said, we use that code 9999 to not use up all our vendor codes. So the history is with the Treasurer Collector's Office on who overpaid and why they're getting the refund. I do not receive all that information because that's his department, and he runs the reports and he does the audit for that. And then, like I said, we get the batch. I make sure that that total matches. If you can see on page 38, there's a check mark there. I check all the batch work that comes up from the Treasurer Collector's Office to make sure that it is accurate, and I make sure it balances to the warrant before we process them.
But again, colleagues, what good does it do me to read these documents if you have so little level of detail that you have no idea what you're looking at? And so what I'm going to do is, because I see it's now 20 minutes to 7, the other list that relates to P22089, I'm just going to give to the auditor, and I can follow up a little bit. The biggest one there is Colonial Ford. I'd like to know it. Colonial Ford on P22089 indicates we spent $100,709.20, and the only notation is other charges and expenditures. Well, you know, did we buy 3 cruisers? Did we buy a truck? Did we buy snow plows? Did we buy?
Those were the school police cruisers that we just purchased.
Okay. So why wouldn't we put school police cruisers in there?
I'm not sure why the school department used that code when they
Okay.
purchased, like, we use vehicles, we usually code ours vehicles.
Yeah,
We don't specify which, if they're police cruisers or fire trucks or DPW vehicles, we just use vehicles.
well, in closing, because I don't want to monopolize this more than I already have, there needs to be a greater level of detail. We need to support the auditor if she needs additional staff and/or different positions added to her office. We've crossed the line on a $500 million corporation, probably up to $700 million, including grants. It's time for the city to get serious about what we do and how we do it and modernize our practices, support our department heads like the auditor, give them the resources they need so that they can generate information for us, because if we remember nothing else tonight, remember what Councilor Rodriguez said. Once this goes across our desk, we own it. Not the auditor, not the mayor, not the collector treasurer, the elected officials who bear the responsibility for making sure that what we're doing in the city is done properly. That falls on us. And I would prefer to be thorough and not simply embrace the past, because that's what's been working. You know, the old expression, this is the way we've always done things. We used to operate on people without anesthesia, but you know what? Gee, we found out we could invent anesthesia and put them out while they're being operated on, and I haven't had any complaints yet. So I think we ought to support Anne Marie and do what we need to do, and if it means talking to the procurement officer or the mayor about some issues, then let's do that. And I thank all of you for your indulgence.
Thank you so much. I have a few questions on the 074. On page 12. It says, Commonwealth of Massachusetts Department of Education, but it says unexpended grant funds, and it's 62,864.
Most of the grants have a spending time limit. So once you do not spend,
Wow.
then we have to send it back. On the school, that is a school side grant, and a lot of times what happens, because I did question this a while back, and I'm not 100% sure on this one specifically, but I did call the school and ask about why we're sending back grant money, and a lot of times they have to send it back, and then to receive it back, because the deadline has come, and they have to, instead of extending that grant, they send it back to them after the fact. So I don't know if that's still the process with some of these grants. It doesn't make sense to me to send the money back for them to return it to us with a new contract date, but sometimes that does happen.
But you see, the year-to-date paid, that was all the same, under the same category of sending it back?
Same grant. No, that's what we expended. So the 62,000 is actually an expenditure, so it's gonna add to that total, but the rest of it is what we spent out of that grant before we returned the 62.
Okay, all right, yep, understood.
And grant numbers are specific for that one grant. So if you see a grant number like that, which is 212, which is a school grant, if it starts with a 2, it's a school grant, that can only be used for that grant. So the total grant budget goes in and expended for that grant only. Those all have specific grant numbers, fund numbers, I should say.
Now, on page 19, it says the frontline technologists, and I guess this just goes back on what been mentioned here tonight, that it just says other charges and expenditures, and it's 85,000 and then 94,000.
Yes, that is through the school department, and it's for recruiting and hiring. It's a company they must have contracted with.
Anybody else has any questions regarding on this warrant that we're reviewing? That
Well, I
way-
just wanted to add something to
Yeah.
your thing, if I can. So it seems that a lot of these so-called issues in terms of description is coming from across the street. I know we have a former
Yeah.
member of the school committee here, but you know what? Now you're wearing the other hat, so deal with it. So we have uncovered quite a few, you know, the Colonial is a perfect example of it. You know, you bought some cruisers. There's nothing wrong with saying you bought some cruisers, you know? So who would be the one to communicate back to the schools and say, look, we need to kind of firm this up a little bit in terms of making it a lot easier? Is it you? Is it us that we have to drag some of those folks in front of us to say,
I mean, I could ask them to be a little bit more descriptive or use better coding. Like vehicles, like we do when we purchase a vehicle, we use a vehicle code, so we know
I mean,
it's.
we don't do that every day, so it's not like
Right.
you're going through this thing every so-called warrant, you know what I mean? Every time a warrant comes up, so it's once in a while. So why
Right.
not be as descriptive as possibly can with something like that?
Correct.
So would you take care of that, or does that have to be one of us?
I can send an email over to Chris and Aldo, and ask them and let them know that it was discussed in the accounts committee meeting and they would like to be able to code things a little bit better in their descriptions. I would certainly can do that.
Should I continue?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So you talked about the issue with the staffing in your office. I know it hasn't been kind of clarified in terms of an assistant to whom and whom is in charge, that kind of stuff, because we haven't done that. I think you're still the interim auditor, so that hasn't been kind of solidified in a sense, you know? And now we hear that there's quite a few individuals missing from your staff. Again, $500 million worth of budgeted items, plus perhaps another $200 to $300 million processed through your office. You are perhaps the office, along with the CFO, that probably keeps the city in check when it comes to keeping us out of Walpole.
Mm-hmm.
So why is it that we still have, you just can't get folks to apply for those positions? Is that what it is? Because is this one of those situations where they're coming in making barely $40,000 or something like that? Is that what it is?
Well, we're missing one payroll position right now. And the other one that has been vacant for close to 6 months now is a higher up position where you need a little bit more qualification. And we just haven't had anybody apply for the position.
Are they still advertising for this position?
I'm in conversations now with the interim HR director to try to find more locations to advertise for that position. It's a unique position, so I don't know who's out there that.
You know, an area that we as a city do not take too much advantage of are the churches in the community. And these churches have a wealth of resources. And sometimes we just rely on putting things in the enterprise or putting things on the web, you know, the websites of the city in the sense that I think if we have more of an effort in terms of reaching into some of these other community-based orgs, some of these non-religious organizations that we have in the city, because that comes up all the time. I mean, at my church, I hear people come up to me and say, "Hey, I'm looking for work. I'm sick and tired of going into Boston. I want to move to Brockton. Are there any positions open in
Well,
the city?"
it's on our website.
Right, but what I'm saying is that if somehow we kind of cross that, it's the thing with Council Fowler is saying, we've been doing it all these years that way. It hasn't been fruitful in a way. So perhaps, you know, they downstairs want to, you know, kind of progress in a different direction.
Recruitment poster.
Yeah, come up with something where a blast email goes out to these nonprofits and community-based organizations to help out. Hey, did you know that the city is looking for such and such and such?
Yeah,
Just
there's,
to help out the process.
the mayor's office just hired a couple of people that are supposed to be working with HR, so that's a great suggestion. I can definitely reach out. She's in the office tomorrow.
And finally, for me, with with the abatements, is there any way that when we get this, that we get a list of the abatements, since it's a contentious type of situation in the city where other people, I mean, I hear it all the time where folks are saying, we submit for abatements, we never get anything. But it seems that the same cast of characters are always getting the abatements. Could we get that list along with this?
I don't get a list of who gets abatements. I only get who gets refunds. It's two different things.
Okay, no, I'm saying, so how do we go, because technically the refunds, well,
The refund is
abatements-
not always caused from an abatement though, because an abatement usually lowers your tax
Right,
amount. A
Right,
refund is usually an overpayment or,
but I'm saying, but those are the ones that you have here, that list.
those
That's
are
what I'm talking about.
real estate refunds.
Right, that's what
Yeah.
I'm talking about. So those refunds, when we have them like this, to have a list that accompanies it, so we know
Sure.
exactly who got them.
No, I can add the list
You know what I mean?
to the packet.
So that, I think it kind of helps, at least it helps me.
Sure.
That's all I have.
Yep, Councilor Power.
I just have a final thought, and I think all of you know, I support the schools. I started off my political career at the schools. But there are times when I just get the impression that they operate independently from city government, when in fact they are a part of city government. My preference would be for the auditor to come down with an edict, a directive, a memorandum, countersigned by the mayor saying, we will do this, 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 and this with respect to accounts payable, processing invoices, et cetera, and they're a part of city government. I know the school committee oversees them. I can't imagine the school committee not cooperating, but that should be done. No one should operate independently from the city auditor. Because again, once the money is requested by the school committee and the school department and it crosses our desk, the buck stops here, folks.
I just want you guys to feel comfortable to a point that our office, we do send things back to the school department if we do not get enough backup information. If it's not clear to us on how they get their figures, if they have to do some type of calculation, if we don't fully understand it, we send it back. I'm not afraid to send the stuff back if we do not get what we need out of their PO and invoices. But I want you guys to know that we look at the description, and I know you guys aren't seeing it, but we do make sure we get that information in the invoices, the dates are correct, there's no cross-offs, there's no whiteouts, there's no tampering with any of them, we'll send them back. So I just want you guys to know that we do that, we look at every single invoice and PO. But I understand what you're saying on the warrants with the descriptions, and yes, that we could do a little bit better job on the descriptions, but then it just creates such a long list of object codes that it would take so long to go through each one if you were looking for one specifically. Because when we set them up for anybody to use, not for an individual. So, you know, I'm open for suggestions. I definitely can talk to IT. I can look at the new version that will be coming out, hopefully in the near future with Munis, to see if it does increase the amount of space that we have for descriptions. That might help a little bit more. Or, like you suggested, another column that we could put a description in when we're creating the PO. The description is better in the system than it prints out. And I know ClearGov is out there for people to look at some of these. And I know it's behind, that comes out of our office, and I'm so shorthanded that I have not had time to redact those reports for the public eyes. So I apologize for that. I will catch it up one of these days. And of course, I'm losing another employee, so I'm gonna be down another one. So it's gonna be tough the next few months, but we'll get back on track, and I'll do as much as I can. I totally.
Is there a better system out there, do you think, somewhere?
I don't know. I've worked on other systems, but I've been on Munis for so long now. we didn't have this type of process because it was a town. So it was a little bit different. We didn't have as many invoices and payments. So it's hard for me to give you an answer on that. I've never worked for another large city, so I don't know if their systems are better.
Do you have any colleagues you might be able to call?
I
and
have my
say-
accounting association. I could definitely,
I
ask
mean,
around and
I'd
see.
be interested to know. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. Maybe some other municipality,
Especially cities of our size, you know exactly what system are they using.
gateway cities, you know?
yeah. And the CFO might know. He's worked at other towns too, cities. You know, he
Well-
might know of a system that might work.
I appreciate all you do.
Yeah.
Nothing of this is meant to be critical. I just would like to go to the next level, that's all.
No, and I understand. I just want you guys to know that we do look at everything.
We have Councilor D'Agostino, because we have to finish up.
Yes, I know.
I'll be quick. I know time is not our friend. So, just a couple of things, and the couple of things in here that I noted my colleagues have asked about. So, but like, you know, the frontline technologies, even I was looking at that, other charges and expenditures. What the heck is that? Right. And so I chaired accounts review on the school side for 5 years, and the same thing with the short descriptions, it didn't tell us anything, drove us nuts too. So I like your idea of kind of this is how we do things, but I wanted to find out, do they, and I don't know this, now that I'm over here, I'm thinking to ask this question. You have the codes in the system and the predetermined descriptions in the system. Are they using those exact same descriptions that you have? And like they're going in, they see it exactly the way you do. It's not like it's separate on the school side?
They can create their own object codes over there.
Okay.
And they do. We have to give them some abilities to do that because they have more people than we do.
Well, and they have expenses that the
They
city
have
wouldn't
different
necessarily
expenses,
have,
and to
right?
keep the work flowing, we do give them some permissions to set up object codes and create their own grant funds.
But like vehicles, if you're buying vehicles on the school side or you're buying vehicles on the city side, a vehicle's a vehicle. It doesn't matter what side of the
We
ledger
share
it's
the
on.
codes, so they have the same codes we do.
Okay, and so I was curious about that, and it just seems like there needs to be a little bit better coordination, or I don't know how to do it so that they're using the codes the same way that you guys are. But also,
Council Fowler was right. I mean, a directive needs to come out of here. to
maybe
say,
that's
this
the
is
answer.
way we're gonna do this.
Right.
Either we do it this way, or we're not gonna do it. You know, it
Yeah.
can't be, well, whatever department wants to do, they do it whichever way they want to. It has to be one set rule for everybody, because, you know, I'm telling you, I was kidding when I said Walpole, but the 11 of us would end up at Walpole if something is, we're the
I'd
responsible.
be there first, so.
Well, somebody has, well,
You and Aldo would go
You're going to
first.
Framingham, you're not gonna go to Walpole.
No, technically it would be me, I sign off
But-
on
You
it.
know what I mean? So, but the buck stops with us, the fact that we're
Right.
checking it off, saying we
Right.
checked it off.
And that's another reason why I want you guys to know, we do look at this stuff, because it is my name signing off on this, approving this.
Well, that
Yes, so I make sure that, it may not be in the description, but I make sure that what they're purchasing is correct.
well, that was the other thing that I was gonna compliment you on, because I have seen on the school side, when we would start to question some of the very vague descriptions, and we would make them get us the detail on it, things being that there were notes on it from the auditor's office, kicking it back for more detail. So I know that you guys are doing that, because I've seen those kickbacks come through when I was on the other side.
That might not be the right word to use.
Yeah, I thought about that afterwards. Oh, well, other side kickback, you know what I mean? The rejecting of paperwork, there we go, is that better? But, and they had to provide you with more information, so I know, I've seen that. But I was curious on the staff, how many do you have now? And how many should you have?
Okay, so right now in AP, we have 1.5, which I do have. The other half of my person is our Secretary of Finance. So she helps me out with the finance meetings. I have 3 payroll positions. I only have 2 filled right now. Our technical and compliance person is the one that's been empty for 6 months. City auditor position has been empty for almost 2 years. And my accountant is now leaving. She took a job with the school department.
And so that'll be 0 there.
Correct.
So you've got some key positions that are,
Yep.
I have, yeah, my key positions are,
okay. All right,
I
was
do
just-
have an internal auditor that works. He's contracted, because he's independent. And he works 2 days a week, and he's actually been pulling a few extra hours for me to help me out.
Right, okay. All right, so, well, I think I definitely agree, looking at something other than Munis, because on both sides, it seems the description is an issue, but maybe coming out with a list of everybody's got to use these the same way, so that a vehicle is a vehicle everywhere, So, thanks.
And it's 6:58, and this meeting is adjourned.